Michael Vanderbilt was the kind of man everyone admired: tall, with a sharp jawline, always clad in bespoke suits that whispered of Savile Row, and so wealthy he seemed to float above the common concerns of mortals. Yet behind the polished smile and designer armor lay a maelstrom of secrets. Whispers of a hidden mistress, hushed payments that could silence a thunderclap, and a lavish private jet only fueled the swirling suspicions in Manhattan's elite circles. Meanwhile, his pregnant wife, Eleanor, presented the perfect picture of grace and elegance, but her gentle demeanor concealed a fierce, intelligent determination. When rumors morphed into undeniable revelations, and heartbreak curdled into a cold fury, Michael found himself caught between two formidable women. One held his heart with her forbidden, intoxicating allure. The other held his future in her capable hands, and she wouldn't hesitate to dismantle his empire to protect what was hers. Michael Vanderbilt was the name on everyone's lips in Manhattan's high society. He'd been splashed across the pages of Fortune for amassing an empire of tech startups, all merged under his flagship company, Vanderbilt Enterprises. Stock soared whenever he offered a confident grin to the camera, and interviews with him became the stuff of Wall Street legend. Indeed, Michael possessed an air of unflappable confidence, arguably his greatest asset. Yet behind the glitz and the gleaming chrome, he nursed a gnawing sense of emptiness he seldom acknowledged, even to himself. Only 3 years ago, he had swept Eleanor Vance, now Eleanor Vanderbilt, off her feet with a whirlwind romance. They wed at Trinity Church, Wall Street, surrounded by luminaries from the worlds of finance, fashion, and politics. The tabloids dubbed it the wedding of the century, and from the outside, it looked like a modern-day fairy tale. But as Michael stood in his corner office overlooking Central Park on a sultry June afternoon, the city sprawling beneath him like a kingdom he commanded, he couldn't help feeling an undercurrent of panic. Every corner he turned, there seemed to be a fresh rumor, a new swirl of gossip that threatened to dislodge him from his gilded throne. He had used his considerable wealth to hush many controversies over the years, paying off disgruntled former employees or settling disputes with ironclad out-of-court deals. But this was different. Isabel Monroe was the name that echoed in his mind. She was a rising socialite, best known for being seen on the arms of powerful men from time to time, a dazzling meteor in the Manhattan night sky. Years younger than Michael, she was seductive, exuding a feline confidence, and was unrelentingly ambitious. In a world where everyone was chasing the next best connection, Isabel cultivated powerful alliances like collecting rare jewels, shiny, precious, and carefully curated. He vividly recalled the night they met under the shimmering chandeliers of the St. Regis, New York. He was hosting a fundraising gala in collaboration with the Global Empowerment Fund, an event that had drawn an A-list crowd. Isabel arrived in a midnight blue gown that seemed to drink the light, turning heads as though an invisible spotlight illuminated her every graceful step. When she approached Michael with a fluted champagne glass and a knowing half-smile, the spark of illicit desire caught him completely off guard. Flattery ensued, as smooth as the vintage champagne. Laughter flowed, easy and intoxicating. By the end of the evening, she had charmed him into exchanging private phone numbers, something he had never done so openly, so recklessly before. That first encounter led to clandestine lunches at Michelin-starred restaurants hidden in plain sight, and stolen nights in opulent penthouse suites overlooking the glittering city. All of it, Michael naively believed, was conducted under a veil of meticulous secrecy. He had relied on his power and his money to safeguard his indiscretions, ensuring that not a whisper reached Eleanor's ears. Except now, rumors about a mystery woman had leaked into the tabloids, their headlines hinting at a scandal. His nerve endings were on fire. He couldn't let it spiral out of control. Little did he know, the scandal would soon become the least of his worries. The private jet was only the beginning, and as far as Eleanor was concerned, her husband's name might soon be etched in the court dockets of the New York Supreme Court. Eleanor Vanderbilt was as poised as she was intelligent. a Harvard Law graduate who once studied under the tutelage of a renowned legal scholar. Eleanor had her own promising career in international law before dedicating herself to philanthropic work. She was the woman who believed fervently in justice and fairness, raising millions for global women's education initiatives through her foundation. Yet, inside the silent, opulent walls of her Park Avenue penthouse, she increasingly felt like a naive girl thrust into a dangerous, adult world she no longer recognized. That morning, Eleanor quietly sipped on her specially blended herbal tea, recommended by her prenatal physician, Dr. Emily Carter at Lenox Hill Hospital. Yes, she was pregnant 3 months along. A child was all she had dreamed of for the last year, in addition to the loving home she and Michael were supposed to build together. Instead, she sensed him drifting day by day, like a ship vanishing into a fog. She tried not to let insecurities, foreign and unwelcome, get the better of her. Michael was a busy man, an empire builder with thousands of employees relying on his vision and acumen. She told herself that his stress, his distance, was natural. But when Eleanor discovered a suspicious, cream-colored envelope tucked into his normally immaculate desk, her carefully constructed illusions began to crack. Inside was an invoice from a private aviation company, referencing a Gulfstream G650 acquisition. The aircraft cost a staggering sum, tens of millions of dollars, and the name on the delivery address was not Vanderbilt Enterprises, nor Michael Vanderbilt. It read, in elegant, damning script, Isabel Monroe. At first, Eleanor's mind refused to process the implications. A private jet in another woman's name? Perhaps it was a complex business arrangement or a philanthropic gesture for some charitable venture she wasn't privy to. She fought to rationalize it, to find an innocent explanation. But the cold pit in her stomach deepened when she remembered her girlfriend Chloe Astor's hushed whispering at a recent luncheon about a high-profile mistress rumored to be kept by a certain Manhattan billionaire. Michael had brushed off those rumors with a confident, dismissive laugh, insisting they were about some fool with more money than sense. Over the next several days, her morning sickness became more severe, compounded by the mental anguish swirling within her. Confusion, sharp and disorienting, threatened to knock her off balance. She remembered Michael once promising her the world. "I will go to any length to keep you happy," he had whispered on their honeymoon in Santorini, the Aegean Sea a brilliant blue behind them. Eleanor reached out for help in the only way she trusted. She called her best friend and confidant, Dr. Olivia Hayes, a renowned psychologist with a calm voice and a keen mind. Olivia provided a much-needed listening ear, but wisely warned her to gather more information before confronting Michael. After all, if he was truly funneling vast sums of money to a mistress, there might be deeper, more dangerous layers at play. Eleanor tried to calm herself, to breathe through the rising tide of panic, but that single invoice refused to disappear from her thoughts. She spent nights staring at the ceiling, thinking of the unborn child within her. A child who deserved a stable family, a devoted father, and a mother who wasn't paralyzed by betrayal. As the seeds of suspicion took root, her gentle resolve hardened into steel. She would not be deceived. Eleanor Vanderbilt was about to embark on a path that would shake her marriage and Michael's world to its very core. Isabel Monroe didn't see herself as a mistress, let alone a kept woman. To her, that term was archaic, reserved for women lacking agency, for wilting flowers. Isabel considered herself a strategist, a player in the high-stakes game of Manhattan society. A Denver native, she had relocated to New York in her early 20s, initially chasing a career in fashion design. Yet, she quickly discovered that her real talent lay in navigating treacherous social circles with an almost preternatural grace. She was bright, persuasive, and adept at reading a room, at understanding the unspoken desires and fears of those around her. Once she found her way into Manhattan's elite gatherings, she leveraged her striking beauty and quick wit to forge relationships with the city's movers and shakers. On one particularly humid evening, Isabel stepped out of a black Escalade in front of a private hangar at Teterboro Airport. The manager of the facility, Richard Combs, an old acquaintance she had once dated, casually greeted her with a weary smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He handed her a set of documents referencing the brand new Gulfstream G650 that, almost unbelievably, Michael Vanderbilt had purchased in her name. Isabel was no stranger to lavish gifts. She had once been flown to Dubai on a whim by a European royal who wanted nothing more than her sparkling presence on his yacht. She had a closet overflowing with designer items bestowed by admirers, trophies of her conquests. But this private jet, this was on another level entirely. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she read the certificate of ownership, the crisp paper cool beneath her fingertips. Michael had confided in her, his voice a low murmur, that he wanted to ensure her comfort for traveling to philanthropic events and business summits abroad. But Isabel wasn't naive. She knew this was more than a thoughtful gesture. It was a gilded cage. It was Michael's attempt to keep her tethered to him, yet safely away from the prying eyes of the city, and more importantly, from Eleanor. The jet was both a bribe and a fortress, designed to guarantee her silence and her loyalty. Yet, a part of Isabel recoiled. She had never planned to become so intricately, so dangerously tied to any single man, especially not one with a prominent, pregnant wife. The tabloids had begun sniffing around, their photographers like wolves scenting prey, and she feared the blowback that might fall upon her if she found herself in the crosshairs of Eleanor Vanderbilt's formidable circle. Eleanor was Harvard-educated, philanthropic, and beloved by Manhattan's old guard elite. One misstep, Isabel reasoned, one careless move, and it could be game over for her carefully curated image, for the life she had so painstakingly built. Isabel contemplated her next steps, her mind racing. If Michael was that desperate to hide her from the public eye, to insulate her with such an extravagant gift, was there something bigger, something more ominous, lurking behind the scenes? She had heard whispers, faint but persistent, about SEC investigations into a few of his recent aggressive acquisitions. Had she unknowingly tied her fate to a man with looming legal troubles, a titan on the verge of a fall? She texted Michael a simple, chilling message. "We need to talk." Isabel Monroe was determined to control the narrative, even if it meant confronting him about the real reasons behind this extravagant, unsettling gift. Because if there was one thing she had learned in the glittering, cutthroat world of New York, it was that knowledge equaled power. And she would not hesitate to use that power, no matter whose heart got broken in the process. Michael arrived home late, his nerves fraying like the edges of a tattered flag. The doorman gave him a polite nod, but Michael barely registered it as he stepped into the lavish marble lobby of his Park Avenue building. It was nearly midnight, and he expected Eleanor to be asleep, a peaceful silhouette in their shared bed. What he didn't expect was to find her waiting in the living room, lights dimmed, her figure rigid against the glittering city lights that stretched beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Eleanor," he tried for a gentle tone, but his voice trembled, betraying his unease. There was a sense of dread prickling the air, thick and suffocating. She slowly turned, revealing tear-streaked cheeks, her eyes shadowed with a pain that cut him to the core. She had a file in her hands, a sheath of papers. Michael recognized them almost immediately. They were documents from the private aviation deal, the invoice for the Gulfstream. His pulse accelerated, a frantic drumbeat in his ears. "Is there something you want to tell me, Michael?" Her voice was steady, a terrifying calm, but the heartbreak in her eyes was impossible to miss, a silent accusation. He inhaled sharply, his mind scrambling to form a coherent, believable response. "Eleanor, that it's not what you think." "Then what is it?" she countered, her voice gaining an edge of steel. "Because it looks very much like you purchased a multi-million-dollar jet for a woman named Isabel Monroe." Michael raked a hand through his perfectly styled hair, searching desperately for a plausible explanation, but the well of excuses, usually so readily available, ran dry. He tried to spin a tale about business alliances, about investor perks, about complicated financial maneuvers, but every word felt hollow, a transparent lie, the moment it left his lips. Eleanor let him speak, her gaze never wavering, her silence more damning than any outburst. Then, she cut in, her voice sharp. "Do you think I'm naive, Michael? Do you think I'm a fool? I know who she is. The tabloids are filled with her name these days, always linked to whispers about you." She laid a hand protectively over her gently swelling stomach. "Is this the man you want to be when our child is born? A liar? A cheat?" His shame curdled into something else, something ugly. Defensiveness, perhaps, or a desperate attempt to shift the blame. "I never asked for any of this," he muttered, his voice tight with a resentment he couldn't quite conceal. "It just happened." Eleanor's carefully maintained composure shattered. "Things don't just happen, Michael," she retorted, her voice rising. "You've built an empire out of your uncanny ability to control events, to bend circumstances to your will. So don't stand there and tell me you suddenly lost control." She waved the documents in his face, the paper crinkling angrily. "We're talking about tens of millions of dollars. Our child's future. Our marriage." She turned away, as though she couldn't bear to look at him any longer, the sight of him too painful. "You need to decide, Michael," she said, her voice now low and trembling with emotion. "Decide what you want, who you want to be, before I walk out of here and never look back." Staggered by the ultimatum, by the raw, unfiltered pain in her voice, Michael tried to approach her, his arms outstretched in a clumsy plea. She recoiled as if struck. "Don't," she warned, her voice a broken whisper. "Just don't." As he watched the woman he once adored, the woman who carried his child, disappear behind the heavy oak bedroom door, Michael Vanderbilt realized that his meticulously maintained double life was crashing down around him in spectacular, irreversible pieces. In that gut-wrenching moment, it dawned on him that what he feared most was not losing money or reputation. It was losing Eleanor and a life they had once so joyfully planned for their unborn child. While Michael scrambled to pacify a wounded Eleanor and keep an increasingly volatile Isabel in check, the corporate underbelly of Vanderbilt Enterprises was churning with its own sinister currents. A federal probe, long rumored among financial circles in hushed tones, was heating up. The Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, had launched a quiet, yet thorough, investigation into possible insider trading and irregularities in the company's recent, aggressive mergers. At first, it was a mere whisper circulating among high-powered attorneys at Sullivan and Cromwell, one of Manhattan's most prestigious law firms. But soon, Michael's top legal advisor, Arthur Sterling, a man renowned for his courtroom prowess, confirmed that the whispers were terrifyingly real. Michael had always regarded Arthur as a loyal strategist, a bulldog in court who could fend off anything, any attack. But even Arthur, with his usual stoic demeanor, seemed uneasy at the potential magnitude of these inquiries. Michael sat in his expansive corner office, gazing out at the familiar skyline as Arthur laid down the grim facts. "They're sniffing around the Innovatech Corp acquisition from last year," Arthur stated, his voice grave, and the deal with BioSyn Solutions. "They claim a tip-off about false financial disclosures, possibly even manipulated earnings reports." Michael felt a pang of paranoia, cold and sharp. Could these investigations somehow connect to the hush money he'd funneled to secure Isabel's silence? Or, worse, to the extravagant private jet purchase that was, on paper at least, linked to Stone Enterprises, one of her shadowy front companies? He had always believed that the pillars of his empire were unshakable, built on legitimate, albeit aggressive, business moves. Yet, in an era of eagle-eyed regulators and relentless public scrutiny, no slip, no matter how minor, went unnoticed. And with the tabloids abuzz over his alleged affair, he worried that a personal scandal might offer investigators the perfect opening, the leverage they needed to dig deeper into his corporate dealings. The SEC was known to exploit personal controversies to pressure executives into cooperation or, even worse, confessions. Arthur Sterling exhaled slowly, a sound like air escaping a punctured tire, and tossed a thick folder onto Michael's polished mahogany desk. We need to distance any questionable transactions from your personal finances, Michael, immediately. And you need to make damn sure the board has your back, or we risk a revolt once this becomes public knowledge, which it inevitably will. The notion of a board revolt rattled Michael to his core. He had painstakingly cultivated an image of supreme, unassailable leadership at Vanderbilt Enterprises. But if the directors began to fear for their own reputations, for their own financial security, loyalty could vanish like smoke in the wind. In a cruel twist of timing, Isabel chose that very evening to call him, her voice tight with a frantic, barely controlled panic. She had been summoned for questioning by the SEC, specifically to clarify her involvement in Stone Enterprises and its opaque financial dealings. Isabel sounded on the verge of hysteria. "Michael, they're asking about the plane," she hissed into the phone. "They want to know if Stone Enterprises has any legitimate stake in Vanderbilt Enterprises, or if it's just a shell. I'm not going down for this, Michael. I swear I'm not." Michael clenched his jaw, a muscle twitching in his cheek. "Keep calm, Isabel. I'll handle it," he said, trying to project a confidence he didn't feel, though he had no immediate plan, no clear strategy. Beneath the shimmering, deceptive surface of his gilded life, the ground was quaking. Between a pregnant wife who threatened to leave him, a mistress who could crumble under investigative pressure and spill everything, and a looming federal probe that could dismantle his entire empire, Michael sensed the perfect storm gathering strength, ready to unleash its fury. If he didn't move swiftly, decisively, everything he'd built and everyone he cared about might be swept away. Eleanor noticed a distinct, chilling shift in the atmosphere at charity luncheons and social gatherings. Friends who once flocked to her side, eager for a moment of her attention, now had a certain guardedness in their eyes, a subtle avoidance in their posture. She couldn't decide if it was pity, judgment, or a morbid combination of both. As rumors spread like wildfire about Michael's affair, sympathy for the betrayed, pregnant wife was quickly overshadowed by the salacious thrill of gossip. Even her longtime confidant, Chloe Astor, heiress to a real estate fortune, seemed more interested in gleaning scandalous details than offering genuine emotional support. But not everyone turned away. An unexpected ally emerged in the form of Ethan Cole, a brilliant, sharp-witted defense attorney from Sullivan and Cromwell, who also happened to be a distant cousin of Eleanor's. When he caught wind of the SEC's escalating investigation and the swirling allegations against Michael, Ethan reached out privately, his concern genuine. "Eleanor," he said, his voice low and serious over the phone, "I'm here if you need help. Michael might be my firm's client, and a powerful one at that, but your family." Eleanor was taken aback, touched by his loyalty, but also keenly aware of the delicate, potentially conflicting position Ethan was in. Representing Vanderbilt Enterprises meant he had a professional obligation to safeguard Michael's interests. Yet, Ethan made it unequivocally clear, "My ultimate loyalty is to truth and justice, Eleanor. If you're in any legal jeopardy, or if you suspect wrongdoing that directly affects you and your child, I'll point you to the right resources discreetly." Meanwhile, Isabel found herself cornered by an unexpected and unwelcome visitor, Ronnie Maxwell, a notorious tabloid journalist known for his cutthroat tactics and his ability to unearth the most deeply buried secrets. He showed up unannounced at her penthouse suite at the Carlyle, brandishing a notepad and a cunning, predatory smile. "Miss Monroe," he began, his voice oozing insincere charm, "I have reason to believe you're at the very center of the biggest scandal to hit Manhattan in years. Care to comment? Perhaps an exclusive?" Her first instinct was to slam the ornate door in his smirking face, but Ronnie was persistent, dangling a tantalizing deal. If she gave him an exclusive, he'd publish a sympathetic portrayal of her, painting her as a victim rather than a villain. "We can paint you as the young, ambitious entrepreneur tragically caught in Michael Vanderbilt's manipulative web," he offered, his eyes glinting. Isabel felt the sting of acute humiliation. She had been too confident, too arrogant, believing she could handle the entanglement, could play the game and win. But Michael, with his recklessness, had drawn her into a vortex of legal complications that now threatened her carefully constructed business reputation and her social standing. Part of her, the wounded, angry part, wanted to expose his secrets, to let the world see him for the duplicitous man he truly was. Another part, the pragmatic, self-preservationist part, feared losing the lavish lifestyle he had provided, especially the prized private jet, a symbol of her ascent. In a smoky, dimly lit midtown bar, Arthur Sterling met with key board members from Vanderbilt Enterprises, hoping to shore up support for Michael, to calm their fraying nerves. But he found dissent instead, a rising tide of anxiety. They worried about stock prices plummeting if the CEO was publicly entangled in a sordid affair and a serious SEC investigation simultaneously. Some murmured about forcing a temporary leave of absence, a cooling-off period. Others, more calculating and ruthless, considered if they should cut ties entirely, sacrificing Michael for the sake of the company's public image and their own financial well-being. Little by little, Michael Vanderbilt's fortress of influence, once seemingly impregnable, was being assailed from every conceivable angle. Allies were scarce, rapidly dwindling, while enemies seemed to be multiplying by the hour. And though he tried desperately to manage each crisis, to juggle the spinning plates, he was finding it increasingly impossible to keep them all from crashing to the ground. Everyone had a stake in the game, and the stakes were rising with every passing, tension-filled moment. As summer draped New York in a heavy cloak of heat and humidity, the chill of tension inside the Vanderbilt penthouse grew increasingly palpable, an almost physical presence. Eleanor's pregnancy advanced, her belly gently rounding, a visible testament to a future she once believed would be bright and full of joy. Now it served as a constant, poignant reminder that life moved forward, relentlessly, no matter the surrounding turmoil. One evening, Eleanor heard the distinct click of the front door, followed by weary footsteps. Michael returned, looking more haggard and defeated than she'd ever seen him. He loosened his tie with a sigh and poured himself a tumbler of scotch, a habit he'd resumed after years of sobriety, a ghost from his college days at Stanford. She watched him silently from across the expansive living room, the city lights twinkling indifferently beyond the windows, waiting for him to speak, to offer some explanation, some solace. The conversation that followed was as raw and suffocating as the city's oppressive summer air. Michael confessed, or at least he tried to. He admitted, his voice raspy, that yes, he had been involved with Isabel Monroe, but he insisted, almost pleadingly, that it was just a distraction, a foolish dalliance that had spiraled dangerously out of control. He claimed he had ended it weeks ago, but the private jet, a monument to his folly, had already been purchased, an irrevocable transaction, a permanent stain. Eleanor glared at him, her eyes cold. "You think that's what this is about, Michael? A fling? A toy you bought her to keep her quiet?" Her voice was low, but laced with a fury that made him flinch. "What about the possibility of legal consequences? Don't you see how vulnerable this makes us, all of us? Our child." He grimaced, swirling the amber liquid in his glass, avoiding her gaze. "I never intended for any of this. The SEC is digging into my deals, scrutinizing every transaction, and Isabel's name her company it came up. Now she's threatening to speak to reporters, to spill everything unless I protect her." He paused, his voice wavering, a crack in his usually impenetrable facade. "I'm terrified, Eleanor. Terrified of losing you, of losing the company, of losing everything I've ever worked for." Eleanor felt a flicker of sadness for the man she once admired, the man she had loved so deeply, but anger, righteous and consuming, roiled within her too. She approached him, her eyes fierce, her resolve unwavering. "I've decided to retain my own attorney, Michael. Ethan Cole has offered to guide me to a top family law specialist. If this escalates, and I suspect it will, I won't be blindsided. I won't be a victim." Michael's face contorted, a mask of disbelief and pain. "You do that to me? Take legal action while I'm already under investigation, while our family is on the brink. Don't you dare act like the victim here. Eleanor shot back, her voice quiet but resolute, each word carefully chosen, precise as a surgeon's scalpel. I'm pregnant with our child, Michael. Our child. If you jeopardize everything with your recklessness, with your lies, I need to ensure we're protected. I won't stand by powerless and watch you burn everything to the ground. A heavy, suffocating silence descended upon the room, broken only by the distant wail of siren. Finally, Michael set his glass down with a trembling hand, the ice clinking forlornly. What do you want from me, Eleanor? What can I possibly do? Eleanor's eyes brimmed with unshed tears, but her voice remained steady. I want the truth, Michael. All of it. I want you to own up to your actions, publicly if necessary. And if that means stepping down from Vanderbilt Enterprises to preserve the company you built, the legacy you dreamed of, then so be it. She took a slow, deliberate breath, her hand resting gently on her belly, a silent promise to her unborn child. Decide, Michael. Decide whether you're going to run from this or face it like a man. But know this. If you choose deceit again, if you try to lie your way out of this, I will protect myself and our child, no matter the cost. In that moment, staring into the depths of her clear, determined eyes, Michael Vanderbilt realized that mere apologies, however heartfelt, would no longer suffice. The ultimatum was clear, stark, and unyielding. Salvage his integrity, or lose not just his wife and child, but also his very freedom. When a story about Michael Vanderbilt's alleged affair and a mysterious private jet finally hit the tabloids, it broke like a thunderclap across social media and the financial news wires. Ronnie Maxwell's publication headlined it, "Billionaire Lover's Air Affair. Vanderbilt's Jet for His Secret Mistress." The accompanying paparazzi photos of Isabel Monroe, looking chic and unbothered as she stepped out of the sleek Gulfstream G650, were enough to set tongues wagging from Wall Street to Palm Beach. Michael's phone erupted with calls from irate board members, panicked investors, and old friends demanding explanations, their voices a chorus of disbelief and condemnation. The PR department at Vanderbilt Enterprises scrambled, desperately trying to craft a statement that could somehow contain the inferno. Eleanor braced herself for the inevitable onslaught of paparazzi who staked out their building lobby, cameras flashing, hungry for pictures of the devastated, betrayed wife. Even Chloe Astor called, her voice a mixture of equal parts feigned sympathy and fascinated horror at the unfolding chaos. Amid the storm, Michael retreated to his home office, pacing like a caged animal, the walls closing in on him. Isabel's betrayal, her willingness to cooperate with the press, stung deeply. He had tried to soothe her panic about the SEC, to reassure her, but in doing so, he'd only made her more acutely aware of how precarious his own position was. With her newfound leverage, Isabel seemed ready to play all her cards, desperate to salvage what remained of her reputation and her financial security. Michael arranged a secret, urgent meeting with Isabel at a discreet suite in the peninsula. When she arrived, her posture was tense, her usually radiant expression weary and drawn. He tried to plead with her, to appeal to any lingering sense of loyalty or decency. "Isabel, why?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Why did you let go public? We had an understanding." Her laugh was hollow, devoid of its usual sparkle. "Don't be naive, Michael. That reporter, Maxwell, he cornered me. My silence was worthless once the SEC got involved, once they started subpoenaing my records. Are you even aware they're asking for my financial records now? If I end up indicted for fraud because of you, I'll sing like a canary, Michael. I'll tell them everything." Michael clenched his jaw, a muscle pulsing in his temple. "I never intended for you to be implicated, Isabel. Let me handle the SEC. I'll ensure your name is cleared, that you're protected. But please, keep the media out of it. I'm trying to protect my wife, my child." She eyed him skeptically, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. "You never told me Eleanor was pregnant." Her voice held a hint of something that might have been regret, or perhaps just strategic recalculation. "Had I known, I might have walked away sooner." This is messier than I bargained for. Michael felt a surge of anger at her sudden, self-serving pity. Isabel, this has gone too far. The board is ready to oust me. My marriage is hanging by a thread. Just name your price for your cooperation. I'll pay whatever it takes. Just make this stop. She raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. You think money solves everything, don't you, Michael? You've built a reputation on power moves, on buying silence and loyalty. But now, the press wants blood, and the SEC wants to take down a big fish to make an example. If you can't offer me guaranteed, ironclad safety from prosecution, then my best bet is to protect myself by cutting a deal with them and with the media. He stood there, words choking in his throat, the bitter taste of defeat rising. Isabel turned to leave, her stiletto heels clicking sharply on the polished marble floor, a sound like nails being hammered into a coffin. The door closed softly, and Michael Vanderbilt was left staring at his own haunted reflection in the darkened window. The private jet, once a symbol of his power and dominion, had now become a millstone around his neck, dragging him and everyone around him into a maelstrom of scandal and potential ruin. Outside of the suffocating Manhattan social bubble, Eleanor found a temporary respite in the quiet, familiar spaces of her childhood home in Greenwich, Connecticut. She often visited her mother, Margaret Vance, a retired professor with a sharp mind and a comforting presence, who lived in an ivy-covered cottage nestled near a tranquil stretch of the Sound. Sitting on the back porch, the scent of salt and roses in the air, Eleanor could almost pretend she was a little girl again, sipping lemonade while the summer breeze rustled the ancient oak trees. But the illusion was fleeting, easily shattered. Her mind was consumed by the crisis unfolding back in Manhattan, a drama playing out in headlines and hushed whispers. She had just seen the lurid tabloid headlines about the private jet, the gleeful dissection of her marriage. There was no escaping the humiliation, the bitter knowledge that her husband's betrayal had become national fodder. Margaret sipped her tea, her brow furrowed with concern as she studied her daughter's pale, strained face. You know, darling, she said gently, sometimes men, even good men, think with their pride or their baser instincts and lose sight of their vows, of what truly matters. I'm not saying this to excuse Michael's abhorrent behavior, not for a moment. But are you sure you're ready for a legal battle that could get incredibly ugly, that could drag on for years? Eleanor swallowed hard, the lump in her throat refusing to dislodge. I can't just sit back and let him ruin everything we built, Mother. Everything I believed in. He put us, me, in this babbing jeopardy with his reckless actions. In the SEC investigation, I'm afraid of how deep this goes, what else might be uncovered. Her mother reached over, her warm hand covering Eleanor's, a gesture of unwavering support. Then you must protect yourself, my dear. And most importantly, you must protect your child. That is your paramount responsibility now. She paused, her gaze searching. The question is, Eleanor, do you still love him enough to give him a chance, even a slim one, to make things right, to atone? Eleanor's eyes welled up, the tears she had fought so hard to contain finally threatening to spill. Did she still love Michael? A part of her, the part that remembered his kindness, his brilliant mind, the man who once wrote her poetry and planned lavish surprise getaways just to see her smile, undoubtedly did. But that man seemed so distant now, a ghost overshadowed by the cunning, deceitful businessman entangled with Isabel Monroe. That afternoon, she spoke with Ethan Cole by phone again. He laid out her options with cool, legal precision. File for a legal separation immediately, pursue a swift and decisive divorce, or demand that Michael sign a post-nuptial agreement, a binding contract giving her majority custody and ironclad financial security should the SEC investigation escalate and his assets be frozen or seized. Ethan's advice was clear and unsparing. Eleanor, you hold more power in this situation than you think. Michael stands to lose far more if you take him to court, if this becomes a public, protracted battle. The board won't want a scandal-ridden CEO dragging the company through the mud. The investors will flee. If you choose to, you can force significant concessions out of him. You can dictate the terms. Eleanor felt a dizzying swirl of conflicting emotions, anger, betrayal, a surprising stab of guilt, and a profound, aching sorrow. Margaret's question echoed in her mind, relentless and demanding. Do you still love him enough to let him fix this? The straightforward answer was that she wasn't sure. She truly wasn't. But she knew one thing with absolute, unshakable certainty. She would not remain silent. She would not be a passive victim. She would not let Michael, or his mistakes, overshadow her rights or her child's future. As evening fell, casting long shadows across the perfectly manicured lawn, she made a decision, a path forward forged in pain but guided by a newfound strength. She would return to Manhattan. She would confront Michael, face to face, armed not with tears or accusations, but with a proposed settlement, a clear set of demands. If he was serious about protecting their family, about salvaging anything from the wreckage, he would meet her terms. Otherwise, she would walk away, head held high, no matter the personal cost. She would not be another powerless wife, another casualty overshadowed by a wealthy husband's egregious misdeeds. The crossroads were set, and Eleanor Vance Vanderbilt intended to choose her path with eyes wide open. Michael sat at the massive mahogany dining table, the remnants of a half-eaten dinner growing cold before him. His appetite had vanished hours ago, replaced by a consuming, gnawing dread of what might happen next, of what Eleanor's return might signify. Time felt suspended, the flickering city lights beyond the penthouse windows casting dancing, distorted shadows against the opulent walls, mocking his solitude. Suddenly, the private elevator chimed, its soft tone heralding an arrival. Eleanor stepped into the foyer, her presence filling the vast space. Her expression was resolute, a mask of calm composure, not the tearful vulnerability he'd grown accustomed to, and in some ways had come to expect. Michael rose, his chair scraping against the marble floor. Eleanor, he began, his voice tentative, uncertain. She raised a hand, a small, decisive gesture that stopped him mid-sentence. We don't need to rehash the affair details, Michael. I'm beyond that now. I'm here for a different reason. She pulled a slim, unassuming folder from her handbag and placed it deliberately on the table between them. I had Ethan draft this. Michael swallowed, his throat suddenly dry. What is it? A provisional settlement agreement, she answered, her tone as cool and detached as a lawyer delivering a final verdict. It spells out, in no uncertain terms, what happens if I file for legal separation or divorce, particularly regarding custody of our child, spousal support, and my rightful share of our assets. He opened the folder, his hands trembling slightly, and skimmed the pages, his eyes widening at some of the clauses, the sheer audacity of her demands. You want the penthouse? And a substantial share of Vanderbilt Enterprises stock? Eleanor, this is... You owe me that much, Michael, she cut in, her voice unwavering. I supported you for years wholeheartedly. I sacrificed my own career aspirations, my own ambitions, and I believed in you without question, without reservation. If you tarnish our marriage, if you jeopardize our child's future with your recklessness, this is the price you'll pay. Consider it reparations. He flinched at the coldness in her voice, the calculated precision of her words. I understand your anger, Eleanor, I truly do. But you must see this from my perspective. My company is under intense investigation. If I sign this now, the board will see it as a sign of instability, of desperation. The stock value will plummet. It could spark a panic, destroy everything. Eleanor's eyes flickered with a complex array of conflicting emotions, a storm brewing beneath the calm surface. That's not my fault, Michael. You created this mess, not me. She gently placed a hand on her pregnant belly, a protective, maternal gesture. I'm thinking about our child's security, about his future. If you're indicted, if you're forced to resign, you'll lose so much. I can't risk being left with nothing, with our child's legacy squandered. Michael breathed deeply, trying to steady his racing pulse. Slowly, deliberately, he closed the folder and ran his hand across its smooth cover. If I sign this, Eleanor, he asked, his voice barely a whisper, Will you give me a chance? A chance to fix things, to earn back your trust. Eleanor hesitated, her eyes searching his, looking for any sign of sincerity, any glimmer of the man she had married. That depends entirely on your actions from this point forward, Michael. You need to clear the air with the SEC fully and honestly. You need to manage this crisis, and you need to publicly acknowledge our marriage, our child, and your failings. No more secrets. No more hush-hush deals. Absolute transparency. He nodded, tears brimming at the corners of his eyes, a rare display of vulnerability. I'll do whatever it takes, Eleanor, he whispered, the words thick with unshed emotion. Whatever it takes. Without another word, Eleanor turned and walked with quiet dignity to the spare bedroom, the click of her heels echoing in the cavernous silence. Once she was gone, Michael sat there, the weight of the agreement, of his transgressions, seeming to press down like an anvil. Signing it might mean salvaging some fragile form of trust, a sliver of hope for the future. Refusing it would undoubtedly lead to a costly, humiliating, and very public court battle. Either way, his fate now lay in the fine print of that folder, and in the unwavering, steely resolve of the wife he had so profoundly wronged. The air outside the SEC's New York regional office was thick with August heat and a palpable sense of anticipation. A line of reporters and photographers had already begun to form across the street, their cameras aimed like rifles, ready to capture the slow, public dismantling of a reputation once thought untouchable. Michael Vanderbilt emerged from the back seat of a sleek black town car, flanked by his chief legal counsel, Arthur Sterling, and two junior associates from Sullivan and Cromwell. Dressed in a charcoal gray suit, every inch of him appeared immaculate, perfectly composed, except for the undeniable strain around his eyes and the tight set of his jaw. It was the look of a man who had spent too many sleepless nights staring at the ceiling, wondering when and how everything would inevitably fall apart. Inside, the hearing room was antiseptic, windowless, and devoid of any comfort. At the long, polished table sat a panel of SEC officials, each with folders thick enough to suggest they already knew more than they were letting on, their expressions impassive. Among them was Agent Sarah Jenkins, the lead investigator, a woman known for her sharp intellect, unblinking gaze, and her unnerving ability to unearth white-collar deception with surgical precision. Michael took his seat. A court reporter adjusted her machine, her fingers poised. A bottle of water was placed in front of him. He didn't touch it. The oath was simple, yet carried the weight of the world. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do, Michael replied, though the words caught briefly in his throat, a knot of apprehension tightening. Arthur Sterling began speaking first, his voice calm, measured, and strategic. My client, Mr. Michael Vanderbilt, is here today in full cooperation with this commission. While recent headlines have unfortunately painted a rather dramatic and misleading picture, we are confident that his testimony will clarify any misunderstandings. Mr. Vanderbilt has nothing to hide. But Agent Sarah Jenkins wasn't there for pleasantries or carefully crafted legal statements. She leaned forward, her voice steady and clipped, cutting through the pretense. Mr. Vanderbilt, can you explain the series of substantial wire transfers from your personal trust to an entity known as Stone Enterprises? Several of these transfers occurred within 48 hours of your company's major acquisition announcements. Would you categorize those as gifts, loans, or perhaps something else? Michael swallowed hard, the air in the room suddenly feeling thin. They were loans, personal investments to support Ms. Monroe's various business initiatives. Business initiatives? Agent Jenkins repeated, tapping her pen lightly on the table, her skepticism palpable. Interesting, considering Stone Enterprises doesn't appear to operate any physical locations, nor does it provide any discernible services. Its listed address traces back to a mail forwarding center in Soho, hardly the headquarters of a burgeoning enterprise. Michael felt a prickle of heat rising under his collar. Ms. Monroe, Isabel, she was in the process of launching a nonprofit organization, a philanthropic venture. I believed in her cause. Agent Jenkins raised a perfectly arched eyebrow. And the Gulfstream G650, purchased via subsidiaries connected to Vanderbilt Enterprises, then subsequently transferred into her name? Does that, too, fall under your philanthropic beliefs, Mr. Vanderbilt? The room went quiet. Even Arthur Sterling seemed to pause, a flicker of unease in his usually impassive eyes. Michael tried to recover, to regain his footing. That was a miscalculation, an error in judgment. It was meant to facilitate her travel to charity events overseas, to further her philanthropic work. There was no intention of misleading the board or any regulatory bodies. The junior investigator seated next to Agent Jenkins leaned in and discreetly flipped a document toward the panel. We have emails, Mr. Vanderbilt, between Ms. Monroe and one of your personal assistants, explicitly discussing the need to keep these transactions off the books to ensure maximum discretion. How do you explain that? Michael's hands clenched into fists under the table, his knuckles white. I never authorized that language. I was unaware of such communications. If it happened, it was a mistake, an overreach by a staff member. The air tightened, the silence heavy with unspoken accusations. Agent Jenkins didn't blink, her gaze unwavering. So, in summary, Mr. Vanderbilt, you claim the substantial funds, the private jet, and the use of shell companies all exist as a series of unfortunate coincidences? And the curious timing of these transactions around periods of significant stock volatility for Vanderbilt Enterprises is mere chance. Michael faltered, his carefully constructed composure beginning to crack. Yes, coincidence. The word sounded hollow even to his own ears. Agent Jenkins sat back, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on her lips, seemingly satisfied with the discomfort her silence produced. Then, she leaned in one last time, her voice dropping to a low, serious tone. Mr. Vanderbilt, this is not a trial. Not yet. But you should understand, we are prepared to pursue further action vigorously. If we discover, as we suspect we might, that your personal relationships were used as a means to conceal material financial transactions or to engage in insider trading, you won't just be explaining yourself in this room. You'll be doing so under federal indictment. The words hit like a gavel, sharp and final. When the questioning finally ended, hours later, Michael stepped into the hallway, drenched in a cold sweat beneath his polished suit. Arthur Sterling walked beside him, his jaw tight, his expression grim. Nothing's definitive yet, Arthur muttered, his voice low. But they're closing in, Michael. They have a scent. We need to get ahead of this, fast. Outside, the sunlight was blinding, a stark contrast to the dim, oppressive atmosphere of the hearing room. Flashbulbs erupted the second Michael appeared, a barrage of blinding light. Reporters shouted questions, their voices a chaotic cacophony, but he kept walking, his expression unreadable, a mask of stone. And then, just beyond the frenzied press line, he saw her. Eleanor. She stood quietly, her coat folded neatly over her rounded belly, a figure of serene composure amidst the chaos. Her eyes met his, not with hatred, not with pity, but with something colder, more unnerving, clarity. The kind of clarity that no lie, no matter how skillfully crafted, could pierce. She nodded, almost imperceptibly, a silent acknowledgement, then turned and walked away, disappearing into the anonymity of the city. Michael didn't call after her. He couldn't, because at that moment, he understood with a chilling certainty. He hadn't just been under oath in front of the SEC. He'd been under oath before the woman whose trust he had shattered, the woman who carried his child. And in both courts, he was failing miserably. The day Manhattan family court summoned the Vanderbilts, the city seemed to mirror their inner turmoil. Overcast skies, a cold, persistent drizzle, and a biting wind that cut through coats and certainty alike. Eleanor sat in the back seat of her legal counsel's car, her hands gently folded over her rounded belly, her heart steady, but her mind a whirlwind of apprehension and resolve. In her tailored navy dress and cream coat, She looked the part of quiet elegance, but underneath the composed exterior, she was bracing for war. Michael, on the other hand, arrived separately with his own legal team, led by the formidable Laura Preston. His face was drawn, his suit impeccably pressed but already soaked at the edges from the relentless rain. The once revered tech mogul, the titan of industry, now moved with the stiffness of a man walking into his own public reckoning. His wife, the woman who once toasted his fortune cover in Santorini, the Mediterranean sun warm on their faces, was now his opponent in a sterile courtroom that would define more than just custody or assets. It would define character, legacy. Cameras flashed in the courthouse foyer, a blinding, intrusive assault. The tabloids had already christened the event the billionaire marriage collapse of the year, their headlines screaming with lurid speculation. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed, and the low murmur of clerks and lawyers filled the courtroom with a sterile, judicial hush. But beneath the veneer of procedural calm, hearts thundered with unspoken anxieties. Judge Peterson, a seasoned jurist known for his impartial but razor-sharp mind, presided from the bench, glancing between the two parties with practiced, keen observation. Eleanor rose first, a pillar of quiet dignity. At her side stood Ethan Cole, her family attorney, sharp as ever, his calm, confident presence anchoring her. "Your Honor," Ethan began, his voice clear and respectful. "We are here today because my client, Mrs. Eleanor Vanderbilt, must safeguard not only her unborn child's well-being, but also her own future in light of serious allegations and proven misconduct surrounding Mr. Vanderbilt's personal and financial dealings. These are not just emotional breaches, Your Honor. They carry significant financial, legal, and reputational consequences that directly impact Mrs. Vanderbilt and her child." He presented exhibits with methodical precision. The Gulfstream G650 invoice, records of wire transfers to Isabel Monroe's shell companies, and press clippings outlining the ongoing SEC scrutiny. This is not a case of simple infidelity, however painful that may be. Ethan emphasized, his gaze steady on the judge. This is a pattern of behavior, a demonstration of a man whose recklessness threatens the very foundation of a family, a man who has proven himself untrustworthy with both marital fidelity and marital assets. Then, Eleanor took the stand. She didn't shake. Her voice, though soft, cut through the courtroom like crystal, each word imbued with a quiet strength. "I'm not here to punish Michael," she said, her eyes briefly meeting his before returning to the judge. "I am here to protect my child. I stood by him as he built an empire. I turned down board seats and lucrative job offers to dedicate myself to our family, to the philanthropic work we once shared. But when I discovered the jet, the lies, the labyrinth of secrets woven into our finances, I realized I could no longer trust him to put our family, our child, first." She paused, one hand resting protectively on her belly. "This child will be born into a storm I did not create, Your Honor. And so, I ask this court for legal separation, for sole custody to ensure stability for my child, and for clear financial boundaries. I need to know that I am not, and my child will not be, tied to a future of consequences that we didn't choose, that were born of deceit." Michael, listening to her calm, devastating testimony, felt something tear quietly within him. Eleanor wasn't attacking him with vitriol or rage. She was, in a way, grieving him, grieving the man he used to be, the promises he had broken. And somehow, that hurt more than any insult, any accusation ever could. His attorney, Laura Preston, rose, her tone polished but defensive. "Mr. Vanderbilt has not been charged with any crimes, Your Honor. He has taken responsibility for his personal failings and has already signed a provisional agreement to provide generously for his wife and unborn child. He deeply regrets the mistakes he made, the pain he has caused, and he is committed to restoring stability and trust if given the chance." When Michael took the stand, his usual unflappable confidence faltered, replaced by a raw, uncharacteristic vulnerability. "I've made catastrophic decisions, he admitted, his voice hoarse, his gaze fixed on his hands. I lost my way. I hurt the woman who believed in me more than anyone, the woman I pledged my life to. But I love my family. I love my wife. I want to be a father to my child. Please, he looked directly at Judge Peterson. Then his eyes found Eleanor's, glossy with unspoken regret. Please don't punish my child for my failures. Eleanor, if there's anything left to save, anything at all, I'll fight for it with every fiber of my being. But Judge Peterson had heard enough. He removed his glasses slowly, polishing them with a handkerchief before addressing the court in a measured, decisive tone. This court does not render decisions based on emotion alone, but on impact, risk, and legal precedent. While Mr. Vanderbilt has not yet been criminally charged, the court finds the financial irregularities presented here today deeply troubling, especially the apparent use of significant marital assets for extramarital endeavors and questionable transactions that are now under federal scrutiny. He looked directly at Eleanor, his expression softening slightly. Mrs. Vanderbilt, given your condition and the considerable uncertainty surrounding Mr. Vanderbilt's legal and financial future, the court grants your petition for legal separation. Sole legal and primary physical custody of the unborn child will be awarded to you, Mrs. Vanderbilt, until further review, post-birth, and pending the outcome of ongoing investigations. A collective, almost inaudible breath left the courtroom. However, the judge continued, his gaze stern as he looked at Michael, then back to both parties. I am ordering a mandatory mediation period before any permanent divorce proceedings can be initiated. Both parties are strongly encouraged to seek professional counseling for the sake of their child, if not for any hope of reconciliation. This court prioritizes the best interests of the child above all else. The gavel fell with a sharp, resounding finality. Outside, flashbulbs exploded, a chaotic barrage of light and sound. Michael exited with his head down, a diminished figure. Eleanor walked out, composed and dignified, escorted by Ethan, her hand instinctively cradling her stomach, a silent shield against the storm. That night, Michael returned to an empty, cavernous penthouse, the silence pressing down like a judgment of its own, each tick of the grandfather clock in the hall a mournful reminder of his isolation. Eleanor, meanwhile, sat by her mother's side in the peaceful quiet of Greenwich, watching news coverage she never asked for, a reluctant star in her own public drama. She had won the hearing, secured her immediate requests, but not without cost, not without a deep, aching sadness. And somewhere deep within both of them, the truth lingered like an echo in the desolate chambers of their broken marriage. Power and wealth may buy silence, may purchase temporary diversions, but they can never, ever buy back trust. And the court, cold, impartial, and bound by law, had just made that truth undeniably, officially real. Autumn descended on Manhattan with a crisp chill, the kind that hinted at the approaching winter. Leaves in Central Park turned burnished gold and fiery red, a stark, beautiful contrast to the somber mood that had enveloped Michael Vanderbilt. The separation hearing had concluded, leaving him in a purgatory of legal limbo and personal desolation. The board of Vanderbilt Enterprises, under immense pressure from shareholders and the public, had formally requested he step down as CEO temporarily, pending the full conclusion of the SEC investigations. He had agreed, a painful but necessary concession. Isabel Monroe, meanwhile, had vanished from public sight, rumored to be negotiating a quiet, comprehensive settlement of her own with the SEC, hoping to emerge from the wreckage with her freedom, if not her reputation, intact. In the midst of this maelstrom, Eleanor's pregnancy progressed. She was nearing her 7th month, carrying a visible glow that even the emotional upheaval couldn't entirely dim. One cool October day, she agreed to meet Michael at a neutral location her lawyer's elegantly appointed conference room under the pretense of finalizing some outstanding financial details related to their separation. Michael arrived early, his heart pounding with a mixture of anxiety and a desperate, flickering hope. He half hoped for a chance, however slim, at an honest, unmediated conversation. When Eleanor entered, her expression was guarded, as he expected, but not overtly hostile. There was a weariness in her eyes, but also a quiet strength. They sat at a polished wooden table, a platter of untouched fruit and glasses of water placed between them like a fragile truce. Lawyers hovered in the background, a silent chorus, but Ethan, with a discreet nod from Eleanor, made an excuse to step out, leaving them momentarily, unexpectedly, alone. Michael mustered his courage, the words catching in his throat. "Eleanor," he began, his voice low, "I know I can't undo what's happened. The words, 'I'm sorry,' feel so inadequate. But I still believe, I have to believe, that we can be a family for our child. That he or she deserves that much from us." She studied him quietly, her gaze analytical, searching. Absent-mindedly, she placed a hand on her belly, a gesture that was both protective and poignant. "Michael, I've been to the doctor. The baby's healthy, strong. That's the most important thing to me right now. That's my sole focus. I won't let anything or anyone threaten that." Her voice was tinged with a deep, unutterable sadness. "But as for us, I don't know if we can ever go back to the way things were. Your affair, the lies, the secrets, they're scars, Michael. Scars that might never fully heal, no matter how much time passes." He felt tears prick his eyes, a humiliating sting of shame and regret. "I'll do anything, Eleanor. Anything. I'll sign any agreement you want. I'll cooperate fully with the SEC, tell them everything, face whatever consequences come. I'll step down from the company for good, if that's what it takes. I don't want to lose you. I don't want to lose our family before it even has a chance to begin." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, but she remained composed, her resolve unbroken. "You've already lost part of me, Michael," she said, her voice soft but firm. "And I don't say that to be cruel. It's simply the reality of what you've done. But you might be able to earn back my respect. Perhaps, over a very long time, something more. But only if you can prove, unequivocally, that you've truly changed, that you understand the depths of your betrayal." Just then, Ethan stepped back into the room with a gentle knock, his timing impeccable. "I'm sorry to interrupt. The final paperwork regarding the division of certain assets is ready for your review, if you are." Eleanor sighed, a quiet exhalation of weariness, and stood up, gathering her composure. She walked toward the door, but paused just before leaving. She turned to Michael, her voice soft yet resolute, a fragile olive branch offered across a vast chasm. "Focus on resolving your legal issues, Michael. Honestly, get the help you need for yourself. Let's try to bring this child into a world without fear, without constant conflict. Then maybe, just maybe, we'll see if there's a chance for us for something new." As she left, the scent of her subtle perfume lingering in the air, Michael clutched the edge of the heavy table, his knuckles white, emotions crashing over him in relentless waves. He was neither free nor entirely condemned, suspended in a painful limbo. The fate of his marriage, his reputation, and even his future as a father rested precariously on his ability to atone for past sins, to demonstrate true, lasting repentance. For now, he would stand on the precipice of a daunting, uncertain redemption, his heart pounding with a fragile hope, praying that one day the scales might tip in his favor, and that Eleanor, in her strength and grace, would find it in her heart to forgive him. 6 months later, a hush fell over a pristine, sunlit maternity suite at Lenox Hill Hospital. It was the day that would irrevocably rewrite the destinies of Michael and Eleanor Vanderbilt. Eleanor was in labor, surrounded by an aura of calm determination, her mother, Margaret, and Ethan providing quiet, steadfast moral support. After hours of tense waiting, pacing the sterile corridors like a man condemned, Michael arrived. He looked visibly drained, the stress of the preceding months etched onto his face. Yet there was a newfound resoluteness in his eyes. The SEC investigation had finally concluded. It had led to a negotiated settlement in which Michael admitted to significant financial improprieties and lapses in judgment, resulting in substantial fines and a multi-year ban from serving as an officer or director of any publicly traded company. He had also formally resigned from Vanderbilt Enterprises, relinquishing his CEO title and severing all official ties, a move the board had accepted as a necessary act to restore the company's battered public image. Though Eleanor had held firm on their legal separation, she had, after much soul-searching and tearful conversations with her mother, allowed Michael the opportunity to be present for the birth of their child. The baby's impending arrival brought with it a fragile, tentative sense of hope, albeit tinted with the indelible knowledge of everything that had transpired, the betrayals that lay between them like a shadowed valley. In the hallway, Michael paced anxiously, memories flooding his mind with an almost painful clarity. His first awkward, exhilarating date with Eleanor. Their sun-drenched wedding day, filled with laughter and promises. The overwhelming joy when he discovered she was pregnant. Each memory was a bittersweet reminder of how far they had strayed from their shared dream, how profoundly he had failed her. The door to the maternity suite opened, and Margaret beckoned him inside with a tired but gentle smile. Eleanor lay reclined, her brow damp with perspiration, but her face, though etched with exhaustion, softened almost imperceptibly when she saw him. "The baby's almost here," she said, her voice breathless between contractions. Michael rushed to her side, his hand instinctively reaching for hers. He gently took it, his own trembling. "You're doing amazing, Elle," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, using a pet name he hadn't dared utter in months. She squeezed his hand, a flicker of the old connection, and for a moment, all grudges, all scandals, all the pain and anger seemed to dissolve in the raw, primal intensity of new life struggling to enter the world. It happened in a rush. The final, determined push, the doctor's encouraging words, and then the strong, healthy cry of a newborn echoing in the room. Asson, 8 pounds of pure, unadulterated possibility. A profound hush fell as the medical staff cleaned the baby and placed him in Eleanor's waiting arms. Michael felt tears spill down his cheeks, unashamed, as he watched Eleanor's face light up with a radiant, beatific glow he hadn't seen in what felt like a lifetime. When a nurse kindly asked if the father wanted to hold the baby, Eleanor glanced at Michael, a silent question in her eyes. He saw a mixture of weariness, trepidation, but also a nascent flicker of something. She nodded, a small, almost imperceptible movement. Carefully, reverently, Michael cradled his son, a tiny, fragile being who knew nothing of private jets or SEC hearings, nothing of betrayal or heartbreak, only the warmth of his mother's embrace and the scent of new beginnings. In that singular, overwhelming moment, Michael Vanderbilt felt humbled, awed, and utterly transformed by the profound gravity of fatherhood. Later, when their son, whom they named Samuel, was cleaned, swaddled, and sleeping peacefully in a bassinet beside Eleanor's bed, Michael stepped into the quiet hallway. His phone buzzed an email from his lawyer with an attachment from Ethan's office, finalizing the last details of the separation agreement. The terms were generous to Eleanor, as they should be, ensuring her and Samuel's complete financial security. Michael had no regrets about that. The only thought that mattered now was that he had a son, a beautiful, perfect son, who deserved better than the manifold mistakes of his father. He heard a soft voice behind him. "You can come back in, Michael, if you like." Eleanor stood in the doorway, her hair slightly disheveled, exhaustion etched on her face, yet she radiated a quiet, indomitable strength that he found breathtaking. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice almost trembling, unsure of his welcome. She nodded. "This baby Samuel, he's ours, Michael, and I want him to know his father." Her voice trailed off for a moment, a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes, as she perhaps contemplated the long, difficult road ahead. Would they remain separated forever, two solitary figures co-parenting from a distance? Or was there, perhaps, a glimmer of hope for something more, something rebuilt from the ashes? Michael followed her inside, the weight of the world, which had pressed down on him for so long, feeling just a bit lighter than before. He took a seat in the chair beside Eleanor's bed, and together, in a comfortable, shared silence, They watched their son's tiny chest rise and fall with each peaceful breath. Samuel's eyes fluttered open, dark and curious, taking in the world for the very first time. In that shared silence, father and mother, once broken by betrayal and torn asunder by secrets, found a fleeting, yet profound, moment of unity, a fragile bridge built across a chasm of pain. No matter what the days ahead held, court hearings, settlement negotiations, personal therapy sessions, or the hard work of rebuilding shattered trust, this was a new beginning. 1 year later, the sun streamed into a cozy, book-filled living room in a brownstone in Brooklyn, a world away from the opulent chill of their Park Avenue penthouse. Samuel, now a cherubic 1-year-old with Michael's dark hair and Eleanor's bright, intelligent eyes, giggled as Michael made a funny face, his laughter echoing through the warm space. Eleanor watched them from the doorway, a soft, genuine smile gracing her lips, a smile Michael hadn't seen directed at him in what felt like an eternity. The past year had been a crucible. Michael had thrown himself into therapy, confronting the emptiness and arrogance that had led him astray. He'd sold off assets, simplified his life, and dedicated himself to two things: being a present, loving father to Samuel, and painstakingly, humbly, trying to earn back Eleanor's trust. He'd started a small consulting firm, advising ethical startups, a far cry from the dizzying heights of Vanderbilt Enterprises, but infinitely more fulfilling. Eleanor, too, had found her own path to healing. She continued her philanthropic work, but also rediscovered her passion for law, taking on pro bono cases for underprivileged women. The separation agreement remained in place, a legal boundary, but the emotional walls between them had slowly, carefully begun to crumble. They co-parented Samuel with a respect and affection that surprised them both. They had family dinners, park outings, and slowly, tentatively, began to share their own hopes and fears again, like two survivors rediscovering a lost language. Tonight, after Samuel was asleep, Michael found Eleanor on their small balcony, looking out at the quiet, tree-lined street. He came up behind her, gently placing a hand on her arm. She didn't pull away. "He's amazing, isn't he?" Michael said softly, his voice filled with a quiet wonder that was entirely new. Eleanor leaned back slightly against him. "He is. And you're a good father, Michael. A better man than I thought you could be again." He turned her to face him, his eyes searching hers. "Eleanor, I know I shattered everything, and I know sorry will never be enough. But every day, I wake up trying to be the man you deserve, the father Samuel deserves. Is there a chance for us to build something new, something real from all this?" Tears welled in Eleanor's eyes, but this time, they were not tears of sorrow or anger. "It won't be a fairy tale, Michael," she whispered, her hand coming up to cup his cheek. "The scars will always be there, but I think I'm willing to try, to see if we can write a new story, together." He leaned down and kissed her, a kiss that was not about passion or possession, but about forgiveness, hope, and the enduring, resilient power of love to find its way back, even from the deepest betrayals. It might not be the grand, sweeping romance of their past, but it was real, it was honest, and for Michael and Eleanor Vanderbilt, that was more than enough. It was a redemption neither had dared to hope for, a quiet, beautiful dawn after a long, dark night. Thank you for joining us on this intense journey of passion, betrayal, and the fight for redemption. The tangled webs of Michael Vanderbilt's life serve as a stark reminder that no amount of wealth or power can shield us from the consequences of our actions, or the quiet strength of a heart determined to protect what holds dear. From a hidden mistress and an extravagant private jet to legal showdowns and a child's birth that ultimately changed everything, our story reveals how trust, once broken, takes immense courage and unwavering commitment to rebuild. Yet, even in the darkest moments, hope, forgiveness, and a new beginning can emerge if one chooses humility, honesty, and the hard path of true change. If you found yourself on the edge of your seat, yearning to know what happens next in the Vanderbilt saga, or if you were moved by their tumultuous path to a fragile, hard-won peace, please be sure to like this video, share it with friends who love compelling narratives, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more gripping stories of real-life drama and fiction to life. Stay tuned for our next riveting tale, because in the world of complex human emotions and dramatic twists of fate, there's always another captivating story waiting just around the corner. We can't wait to share it with you.